The coffee was still warm when Amy Lynn Carpenter vanished in the desert town of Moab, Utah, population 5,382. The March morning of 1977 arrived with a cold wind and sunlight spilling across the red cliffs surrounding the Colorado Valley. At 6:45 a.m., Amy's neighbor, Mrs. Ruth Miller, saw the 17-year-old girl step out onto her porch, wearing a jean jacket and carrying a small cloth bag. Amy paused by the dirt road where a light blue pickup truck was waiting, its exhaust faint in the chilly air. Mrs. Miller said she leaned in, spoke a few words, then the door closed and the truck drove off toward Price Canyon, leaving a trail of red dust curling in the early sunlight. What happened in the next 3 hours would haunt Moab for 47 years. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. On the morning of March 14, 1977, Moab, Utah, was still steeped in the chill of late winter. The sun had just risen over the La Salle Mountains, casting light through a silver haze over the coal ash-red desert. The air was so dry and still, you could hear the wind brushing across tin roofs of prefab homes, the creak of a wooden door at the corner store. On the south edge of town, the small Carpenter family home was lit earlier than usual. Amy Lynn Carpenter, 17, was getting ready for her morning shift at the Red Rock Diner along Highway 191. She tied back her hair, slipped on a faded jean jacket, and tucked a notebook and wallet into a cloth bag with a sunflower design. In the kitchen, the coffee pot simmered softly, its aroma mingling with the morning chill. Her mother, Margaret, half awake on the sofa, heard the door open and close, the sound of her daughter's footsteps fading on the dirt path. Outside, the early light spilled across the desert, turning the red dust a warm gold, a glow unique to Utah in March. Amy walked slowly through the sand, her breath forming faint wisps. A light blue pickup truck stopped a few yards away, its engine idling steadily. From her house across the street, the neighbor saw Amy lean in, saying something to the driver, her hand gripping the bag's strap, wind tossing her hair back. No one heard what was said, and no one thought it mattered. A minute later, the truck rolled north, and Amy disappeared around the bend. By noon, the sun was high, scorching the sandstone cliffs. At the Red Rock Diner, Amy's white apron still hung on its hook, her name absent from the time card. By early afternoon, the manager called the Carpenter home, mildly annoyed, asking why Amy hadn't shown up. Margaret froze, saying her daughter left early. She looked out the window, the harsh daylight making everything seem still. The wind picked up, swirling through the yard, rattling the wind chimes. She dialed the Grand County Sheriff's Office, her voice trembling but trying to stay calm. "My daughter hasn't come home." That call marked the start of a disappearance no one in this small town could forget. As night fell, yellow porch lights flicked on along the main street. The desert beyond town turned pitch black, and somewhere in that silent expanse, the last trace of Amy Lynn Carpenter vanished. No one knew it was the last time Moab would see its girl. The next morning, Moab woke to an odd silence. The small town, used to the rumble of passing trucks and wind whistling through cliffs, felt slower that day. As the sun cleared the La Salle Range, the first Grand County Sheriff's patrol car stopped at the Carpenter home. Margaret stood on the porch, clutching a coffee mug, her eyes hollow from a sleepless night. The deputy took brief notes and called for backup. The case was officially opened at 8:45 a.m. By noon, a small search team was assembled, 3 deputies, 2 local volunteers, and a K-9 named Scout. They fanned out along Highway 191, the road stretching north out of town, past red rock slopes and treeless dust patches. Utah's sky was clear, the early sun casting a pale orange glow across the desert, like brick dust. Each step crunched softly on the gritty sand, the only sounds the wind and the faint clink of a road sign. Scout sniffed around the Carpenter house, then moved toward a dirt trail leading out of town. He stopped a few times, barking briefly, but found nothing beyond overlapping tire tracks. The team covered 15 miles with no identifiable items. By noon, the temperature spiked, the wind shifted, and sand swirled like smoke. Under the harsh sun, red dunes rose like frozen waves, rendering any remaining traces illusory. On the second day, the search expanded west toward Cisco Wash, a low, brushy area of dry stream beds and rocky crevices 10 miles from town. Another group combed the dirt road toward Arches National Park. Locals brought binoculars, shovels, and water bottles, walking in rows, eyes scanning the ground. Many had known Amy since childhood, growing up in the same church. They called her name, the echoes fading in the stark air. No response. Pickup trucks rolled along, their tire marks layering over older ones. By day's end, a strong wind rose from the east, kicking up blinding dust, erasing the paint-marked signs they'd placed. "We're losing time to the desert," one deputy said, voice hoarse. "Out here, everything vanishes after one gust." On the third day, at noon, a search team led by Lieutenant Whitmore spotted something glinting among low shrubs. They stopped. About 300 yards away, under a dust-covered mound, was an old Ford Maverick. Its silver paint was coated red with thick sand, as if it had sat there for days. No crash marks, no drag traces. The driver's door was locked, the passenger door slightly ajar. When Whitmore opened it, a wave of hot air hit, carrying a faint burnt plastic smell from sun-baked upholstery. On the passenger seat was a brown leather wallet, still holding Amy's cash and ID. A paper coffee cup rolled onto the floor, its dark, thickened contents dried by heat. The radio was on, crackling with faint local station static. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no stray hairs. The key was in the ignition, set to ACC. Everything was eerily tidy, as if staged on purpose. Whitmore stepped back, scanning the area. Another set of tire tracks ran parallel to the Mavericks, for about 10 yards before vanishing in the sand. The fine, dry sand and wind had erased most grooves. He ordered the scene secured. A temporary forensic tech from Price arrived with a camera and measuring tape. They marked the car's position, noted wind direction, and photographed details. The leather seats, dashboard, gear shift. Through the window, Whitmore saw the dashboard clock stopped at 7:23. No one knew if it marked when the car shut off, or if the heat had broken it. The sun was high, reflecting off the windshield, making the car glow in the dead land. No clear footprints remained, just shallow sand dents, possibly from the search team. As news spread to Moab, townsfolk lined the streets, watching patrol cars pass. Many believed Amy was taken by a stranger. Others feared she'd had an accident and was lost in the canyons. But when word came that the car was found nearly intact, fear turned to something indescribable. A simmering unease everyone felt. A neighbor whispered, "The desert doesn't swallow people that fast." That night, Whitmore filed a preliminary report. In the notes he wrote, "Scene unusually clean. No signs of flight, no evidence of accident. Suspicious disappearance." Outside the station, night wind swept the desert, dusting the hoods of patrol cars. In the dim yellow light, Moab was as quiet as the morning Amy left, except now, no one believed she'd return. The next morning, the area around the Ford Maverick was fully cordoned off. Police set up tape and flagged key spots. The ground was churned with dozens of footprints, mostly from the prior day's rescuers. Still, under the car's undercarriage, forensic tech Russell Holt found a series of small, deep, clear shoe prints, women's size, likely Amy's. He carefully photographed and measured their spacing. The prints stopped at the rear of the car, turned, then vanished in wind-blown sand. "She stood here," Holt said softly. Almost a whisper. Beside him, Whitmore noted the dry mud splattered on the rear fender. Unlike Moab's red dust, it was dark brown with an orange sheen, fine as powder. When samples were sent to a makeshift lab in Price, initial results showed high levels of red clay minerals, found only in narrow areas around Price Canyon, nearly 80 miles away. The car was towed to the Grand County Sheriff's impound lot. Under its thick dust, the undercarriage was oddly clean, free of grass or pebbles, typical of desert driving. When the tires were removed, technicians found two distinct mud layers in the front wheel wells, a dry, dark layer below, and a finer, fresher layer matching the scene's dust. The moisture and color differences suggested the car had been driven elsewhere before being placed here. Whitmore stood, arms crossed, reviewing the report. The car moved at least twice. Someone may have driven it back and parked it precisely. He ordered a check on the secondary tire tracks. One of the four tires had a distinct tread, a spare sourced from Carbon County. Not replaced by the family, Margaret Carpenter confirmed. Police noted, tire possibly changed during transit or by someone else. In the noon sun, the car sat in the lot, reflecting a pale metallic sheen. Everything was too neat, seats unmoved, seat belts folded, windshield wiped clean with a dry cloth. Holt took angled photos, saying, "It's like a staged picture." Whitmore nodded, the term staged scene flashing from his academy days. That afternoon, they canvassed witnesses along Highway 191. Frank Dorson, a delivery driver from Green River, recalled seeing a light blue pickup truck heading opposite Moab around 7 a.m. Monday. "I remember it because the cab had a dent on the right door, and the license plate was nearly covered in mud," he said. Asked if he saw anyone with the truck, he replied, "Not sure, just a shadow in the passenger seat, light-colored hair." Dorson wasn't certain, but the timing and direction matched Amy's departure. The info was logged as lead potentially relevant. The next day, forensics finished examining the car. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no foreign fingerprints beyond Amy's and her mother's. The passenger seat leather was smooth, no weight impressions, as if no one had sat there. Fiber analysis found only Amy's blonde hairs, some dust, and two dark fabric threads of unknown origin. The dashboard radio was tuned to 97.5, Grand County's morning news station, volume low, as Amy liked when driving. Whitmore pieced it together. She left for work, stopped to talk to someone, then vanished. But the car wasn't stolen, wasn't damaged, showed no drag marks, and was returned meticulously. "It's like someone wanted us to see it but not understand," he told Holt, staring through the windshield. Before sunset, Whitmore sketched a scene map, marking the Maverick's position, wind direction, secondary tire tracks, and sand dents. The sketch ended with a small arrow pointing northeast, toward Price Canyon. As he left the lot, strong winds kicked up red dust clouds, obscuring the car as it was towed to a shed. That evening, the preliminary report went to the state sheriff's office. In the assessment, Whitmore wrote, "No signs of struggle. Scene clean, likely staged. Unusual mud suggests car left Moab area. Investigation direction suspected coercion or abduction." He closed his notebook, leaned back, hearing the wind rattle the station's windows. Outside, the desert cast a vast shadow over town, and the car, the only evidence, sat in the shed, chillingly pristine. Whitmore knew the initial clues might not lead to the girl, but they confirmed one thing: someone deliberately erased everything, and did it too well. When the Maverick was moved to the Grand County shed, Sheriff Dale Whitmore formally launched a full investigation. News of the disappearance spread through Moab, appearing in the Times Independent with a brief headline, "17-year-old girl vanishes on way to work." Whitmore, a 20-year veteran, knew the longer a missing person case dragged on, the slimmer the chance of finding them alive. He started close, Amy's circle of acquaintances. At the Red Rock Diner, where Amy waited tables, co-workers said she was quiet, punctual, never absent, without notice. They didn't know if she'd planned to meet anyone that morning. One recalled that the previous Sunday night, Amy stayed late cleaning tables, chatting with a stranger, a man about 30, dark hair, glasses, driving a light blue pickup. No one knew his name. He ordered black coffee, sat by the window. He kept looking outside, like he was waiting for someone, a waitress said. The detail caught Whitmore's attention. Cross-referenced with the witness, who saw a similar truck on the road, he underlined in his notebook, "Blue pickup truck, potential suspect." Over 2 days, police questioned Amy's friends at Grand County High School. No one said she planned to leave town. A close friend mentioned Amy seemed anxious lately, once saying she felt watched when leaving work late. No one took it seriously. Moab was peaceful, violent crime, nearly non-existent. Whitmore ordered a check of criminal records within a 100-mile radius, focusing on harassment or car theft. The list topped 30 names, but none matched the diner man's description. Meanwhile, calls flooded the station. A Green River woman claimed she saw a blonde girl walking the highway, carrying a bag like Amy's. Another in Colorado said they picked up a hitchhiker, very like the girl in the paper. Whitmore sent deputies to verify each tip, but all led nowhere. Each clue was marked with a red pin on a wall map. By week's end, it was dotted across Nevada, Arizona. "We're chasing shadows," Deputy Holt said, voice rough from exhaustion, pulling off his headset. On day 8, Whitmore received the forensic report from Price. It confirmed no crash or struggle in the car, no blood, no fight marks. The only oddity was the mud under the chassis, rich red clay from Price Canyon. "Means someone drove her car there, then brought it back to Cisco Wash," he said, pointing at the map. "If so, they know this area well, know where to hide." Another lead opened when Whitmore visited Reverend Elias Barlow, the local church pastor where the Carpenters attended. Barlow had taught Amy's Bible class. He spoke calmly. "Good, gentle girl. Sometimes a bit dreamy. I don't believe anyone would harm her." Whitmore jotted a brief note, seeing nothing odd. Later, that seemingly harmless statement would become a chilling piece of the puzzle. The following days, Moab sank into a heavy mood. Every night, flashlights swept the rocky ravines outside town, where search teams worked silently. Utah State Police helicopters circled Arches, their spotlights scanning the land. Nothing. Each day, hope faded a little more. Local papers shifted from news to sympathy, describing Amy as the girl with a gentle smile, lost in the red desert. By the second week's end, Whitmore sat alone in his office, staring at an empty evidence board. Every theory stalled. He dismissed the runaway file, no reason. Suggested Amy wanted to leave. No boyfriend, no family conflicts, no mental issues. All signs pointed to one thing: forced removal from the car by someone she knew or trusted. If it was a stranger, she'd have fought, Whitmore told Holt in their last meeting, but there's no sign of that. That was when the case shifted. Police rechecked Amy's acquaintances, regular diner customers, teachers, neighbors. They knocked on doors, took statements, verified alibis. No one had a perfect alibi, but none had a clear motive. As night fell, Whitmore stood by his window, gazing at the misty La Salle Range. In the valley, car lights swept the dirt road, then vanished. He wrote in his log, "No longer a voluntary departure, known individual, likely involved. Missing, high likelihood of abduction." That night, wind rose, sand coating the station's steps. A patch of clear sky broke through the stars, reflecting on the red desert. Moab held its breath. In the absolute stillness of this land, Dale Whitmore knew he was no longer searching for a lost girl. He was tracking someone who'd calculated every step to make her disappear. The summer of 1977 passed quietly. Searches dwindled, then stopped as desert temperatures topped 40 degrees. Sandstorms erasing any lingering clues. In early July, Whitmore sent a 7-page report to Utah's state police, requesting the case stay investigation in progress. The response was a curt note. No identified suspect, no criminal evidence. Downgrade to missing person file. He reread the dry words, feeling his efforts reduced to a cold administrative line. In the impound lot, Amy's Ford Maverick sat under a tarp, awaiting a decision. Holt, the forensic tech, did a final check and found evidence bags unsealed, not meeting the state's new protocols. Some soil samples had dried, mislabeled. A few bags were scrawled with faint pen marks, from car floor. When he reported it, Whitmore stayed silent, then signed the order to transfer all evidence to storage. He knew it would be forgotten in iron boxes stacked in the Grand County basement. Among hundreds of unsolved cases piling up over years, fall came, and Moab began to forget. The Red Rock Diner changed owners, its old sign faded. Amy's co-workers gradually left. On the post office bulletin board, her black and white photo remained, edges curled, the word missing fading in the sun. Whitmore paused there each time he passed, reminding himself of the unfinished. But even he had to admit there was nothing left to pursue. No new witnesses, no new evidence, no crime signs. The case slid into silence, like the land that swallowed the young girl. In February 1978, an internal meeting was held at the county office. The minutes read, Case Hash 77-238. Insufficient evidence to continue active investigation. After the meeting, Whitmore stepped into the hall, sunlight glinting off the Grand County Sheriff's Office brass sign. He placed the 200-page file into storage, labeling it Missing Person. Amy Lynn Carpenter. The name, once a case under investigation, was now just another missing person file in Utah's endless list. That evening, he drove through the eastern outskirts. The prefab homes sat silent, porch lights flickering faintly. The radio played a weather report. A rare snow was coming. Whitmore turned it off, letting the wind whistle through the window cracks. He stopped at the dirt road leading to the desert, where the Maverick had been found. Darkness blanketed the empty land, only a faint glow from the distant town. He stepped out, scooped a handful of fine blood-red sand under the moonlight, and let it slip through his fingers. The wind carried it away, leaving no trace. The next morning, the county office sent a final notice to the Carpenter family. Due to lack of criminal evidence, the investigation is officially suspended. Margaret read it, folded the paper without a word. Their small home grew emptier. Within months, she sold it and moved to Provo, taking a few photos and her daughter's jean jacket. Neighbors said she kept the porch light on every night before leaving, though no one was there to return. Time moved on. In Moab, tourist seasons came and went. Visitors flocked to photograph arches, and newspapers praised the rugged beauty, no one mentioning the girl who vanished on the red dirt road. Only a faded photo remained, dusty in a glass frame in a corner of the sheriff's office hallway. Whitmore occasionally opened the file cabinet, staring at his handwritten note from that year, possibly abducted by person known to victim. He didn't erase or amend it, a way to preserve a piece of the case he knew he'd lost. When winter 1978 brought the first snow to the desert, Moab settled back into its familiar calm. Christmas lights strung along the main street. The scent of pine and wood smoke filled the cold air. But for Whitmore, that calm was a thin veneer. Each gust of wind carried the echo of an engine from Cisco Wash, a sound he couldn't prove but couldn't forget. On December 22, 1978, Case Hash 77-238 was officially archived in Grand County's storage. A red close stamp marked the first page. One copy went to the state police. Another stayed in the basement's iron cabinet. No one knew it would take nearly half a century for that file to be reopened. By then, for everyone in town, the Amy Carpenter case was over. Moab returned to its quiet, only her faded photo remained. A 17-year-old smiling faintly under desert sunlight, a face the wind and time would slowly blur until no one remembered she'd existed. In January 1990, the desert wind still scoured Moab's red dirt streets, but in the small office behind Grand County Sheriff's Station, Sheriff Dale Whitmore was packing up his final case files after 30 years of service. Thinner now, hair nearly all gray, his rough hands trembled slightly as he flipped through yellowed documents, corners curled from dampness. Among the files to be handed over, he paused at one with faded ink. Case Hash 77-238. Amy Lynn Carpenter **. The red close stamp in the corner stopped him cold. The words clung to his eyes. He said nothing to anyone, quietly slipped the file from the box, tucked it into a leather satchel, and took it home. Whitmore's wooden house sat on the town's edge, facing Price Canyon. That night, in his study under a dim yellow lamp, beside an old radio forecasting snow, he opened the file. The paper crackled, smelling of mold and time, mixed with cigarette smoke. Most documents were intact, though some evidence bags were poorly sealed, tape dried out. He checked each one, searching for what he felt he'd missed 12 years ago. In the fourth bag, in the corner, he found a small dark red fabric scrap, about an inch long, stuck to the nylon's inner lining. The label, in faint blue ink, read "Recovered from rear seat. Unidentified fiber." Back then, the state lab lacked tools to analyze synthetics, so it was overlooked. Whitmore held the fabric under the lamp. Darker than blood, it shimmered with a faint purple sheen, smooth, tightly woven, a material rarely worn in Moab's dry heat. He placed it on white paper, examined it with a magnifying glass, and scribbled in his notebook, "Synthetic fabric, likely from industrial clothing. Traced to Carbon County. Something in the south." The note was messy, but in his mind, a Utah map formed, a red line trailing to Price Canyon. The only place with clay soil, matching the mud under Amy's car. Two clues, the fabric and the soil, suddenly aligned, like echoes pointing south. The next morning, he called an old contact at Carbon County's industrial office, asking about textile plants in the 70s. The reply was brief. Only Western Fiber Mill in Price. They made dark red nylon for a religious group's promotional order. I vaguely recall Sage Hollow Institute. Whitmore repeated the name in his head, feeling it was both foreign and vital. He added to his notebook, "Western Fiber Mill, religious contract. Verify." That night, snow dusted the roof. He brewed coffee, turned on the lamp, and pored over old crime scene photos. Everything felt frozen in memory. The clean car, red dust, small shoe prints. But this fabric, if from someone's uniform or item in Carbon County, could be the only key to a lead he hadn't dared pursue. Part of him still believed Amy was lured by someone she knew. Now that theory sharpened, tied to the south, where stone tunnels and small churches dotted the valley. But Whitmore knew he had no authority. The case was closed, a missing person file, no budget left. He wrote private letters to old colleagues in Price and Salt Lake, attaching his notes, asking them to flag anything about Sage Hollow. No replies came. One called back, chuckling dryly. "Dale, that case is dead. Let it rest." He hung up without a word, staring at the Utah map on his wall, a bold red line from Moab to Price, ending in a small dot. The South. In the years that followed, Whitmore lived reclusively, tending his backyard garden, occasionally driving to Cisco Wash, where the Maverick was found. He'd stand gazing out, wind stirring red dust like fog. No different from 13 years prior. On his passenger seat, he always carried the leather satchel with Amy's file copy, hidden from others. Neighbors said some nights his study light burned until dawn, his silhouette still by the window. In April 1996, Whitmore died of a heart attack. His funeral was simple, attended by a few old colleagues and townsfolk. While sorting his belongings, his nephew found a worn notebook in the desk drawer, its final scrawled lines. "Something in the South. Don't let this case close forever." Beside it, in a sealed envelope, was the red fabric scrap, carefully wrapped, with a note listing the Western Fiber Mill's address in Price. The local police handed all documents to Utah's state archives as protocol. File hash 77238 was stored again, shelved under historical cold cases, 1950, 1980. In the third basement of Salt Lake City's administrative building, on the cover, an archivist added, "Donated by retired Sheriff D. Whitmore's estate." No one read it closely. The file sat among hundreds, silent for nearly 2 decades. Under the dim glow of fluorescent lights, That fragile file rested among stacks of old paper, like a memory buried in sand. No one knew that within, among yellowed pages, a dark red fabric scrap remained. Whitmore's last message from a girl lost in the morning of 1977. In early 2005, Utah's state archives began reviewing unresolved cold cases, prioritizing suspicious disappearances. Among hundreds of files from counties, a thin one with a faded brown label caught the eye of Camille Duarte, a young investigator newly assigned to the Cold Case Division. The cover barely read, Amy Lynn Carpenter, Grand County, 1977. A corner bore a fainter note, donated by retired Sheriff D. Whitmore's estate. Camille lingered, her finger tracing his name. She'd heard of Whitmore, the old sheriff haunted by a Moab disappearance no one else cared to recall. She took the file to her desk and opened it. The smell of old paper hit, mixed with archive dust and faded ink. Among the few preserved items was a small nylon bag with crumbled soil, labeled "From Car Undercarriage," and black and white photos of the desert scene. But what held her longest was a note tucked between pages in a man's shaky handwriting. Something in the South. No signature, just initials. D.W. She read it repeatedly, feeling the writer reaching across 40 years of silence. Checking the file, Camille saw the soil sample was never fully analyzed with modern methods. In the 1970s, labs only noted color and basic minerals, lacking tools for trace geology. She sent it to the University of Utah's Geochemistry Center in Salt Lake City. Under an electron microscope, the soil revealed red grains with gray flecks, typical of sedimentary rock with hematite and bentonite clay, rare around Moab, but common in Price Canyon, a narrow valley 80 miles south. The report stated, composition consistent with soil layer of Carbon County, Price Formation. Reading it, Camille felt a chill. Whitmore's South note suddenly held weight. She cross-referenced state mineral maps and marked a Utah area from Price Canyon to western Carbon County. This region, once mined for coal, hosted small industrial and religious sites that appeared and vanished without records. Among abandoned sites, one name intrigued her, Sage Hollow Institute. Initially, she thought it a private reform center, but state licensing records were empty. No tax ID, no business filings, no operational permits. She searched religious registries. A 1974 filing surfaced, Reverend Elias Barlow, Sage Hollow Religious Institute, Carbon County, Utah. 3 years later, it was canceled for lack of legal documentation. No further details. Elias Barlow appeared, then vanished from official records. After 1980, Camille sensed a faint thread linking Whitmore's clues, Price Canyon soil, red fabric from Carbon County, and now a shadowy religious group in the same area. All pointed south, where he'd stopped writing. She scoured 1975, 1980 local papers. In an old Price County Herald, a small note read, Sage Hollow Institute announces moral restoration program for minor girls, accepting registrations from western states. No photos, no address, just a P.O. box. 3 years later, the same paper noted, Sage Hollow Center ceases operations, no reason given. She spread the documents on her desk. A timeline emerged. Amy vanished in March 1977. Sage Hollow peaked that year. Whitmore found soil from that region, but couldn't verify it. She opened a new topographic map, marking Carbon County property records. In the low woods east of Price Canyon, coordinates listed Barlow Foundation, registered in 1975, vacant since 1981. Camille requested land records from the registry. 3 days later, a reply, the land was bought in 1985 by a Salt Lake shell company, now unused. No one had checked it. Her heart slowed, sensing she was on the path Whitmore left unfinished. In her notebook, she wrote, Price Canyon, Sage Hollow, Barlow. It all starts here. Before leaving that night, she looked at Whitmore's file. The paper was brown, edges worn. At the last page, under the signature, a penciled note she'd missed. If anyone finds this, look under the ground, not on the sand. It gave her chills. She closed the file, the lamp reflecting on its scratched leather cover like Moab's red dust. Outside, Utah's night was clear, stars blanketing the sky. From her office window, Camille gazed south, Price Canyon swallowed in darkness. She wondered if Whitmore had sensed something waiting beneath that soil, searching for it his whole life. Now, nearly 30 years later, that task had passed to her. Opening a new notebook, under the desk lamp, her first line echoed his "something in the south." In the following weeks, Camille Duarte dove into every record about Sage Hollow Institute. It didn't resemble a religious group, but a mirage from an era when moral restoration centers sprouted in remote lands. No oversight, no questions asked. Elias Barlow first appeared in an old Price County photo, standing before a church gate in a long robe, face kind, smile almost rehearsed. The caption read, "Founder of Sage Hollow, a place for second chances for lost souls." The slogan felt both pious and chilling. Camille contacted the state's religious office, but they found only a faded registration, no tax records, no financials, no boarding permits. By law, religious facilities with fewer than 20 students didn't need to report. A perfect loophole for places like Sage Hollow to exist and vanish. In a 1970s religious community directories listing, she found a group photo with a promotional article. The yellowed image showed 13 girls in rows before a 2-story wooden building, patchy grass, backed by Carbon County's barren hills. In the second row, a blonde girl with shoulder-length hair faced the camera, her smile forced. Though grainy and degraded, the features stopped Camille. She enlarged it, comparing it to Amy Carpenter's file photo, chin shape, nose, eye spacing, strikingly similar. She taped the photos side by side, staring long. Under the desk lamp, a case dormant for nearly 30 years roared back. Camille formally requested access to Sage Hollow records from the Barlow congregation, now operating north of Price. A week later, a curt reply. "We hold no documents on that facility. Reverend Barlow is deceased. His organization was independent, unaffiliated with our church. Please cease contact." The response was too quick, too cold, like a prepared deflection. Camille folded it, unease rising. Denial often came when someone feared the past being stirred. Undeterred, she visited the Carbon County Library, where an elderly librarian pulled a dusty microfilm set dated 1976, 1978. In the classifieds, small ads read, "Sage Hollow Institute Restoration Program for Young Women," phrased like a religious summer camp. Some lines emphasized, "We take in girls with behavioral issues, guiding them to moral light." Camille's stomach sank with each word. A center for girls with behavioral issues, like the pseudo-reform camps investigated in Idaho and Arizona in the 70s. They called it faith restoration. It was confinement. In Carbon County records, she found a land registration for Barlow Foundation, 30 acres on Price Canyon's south edge. It lapsed in 1981, no reason given, signed over by Clara Barlow, Elias's sister. Camille searched for her, but Clara vanished from citizen records after 1982. The civil office shrugged. No one by that name in current residency files. That night, Camille returned to her office late. The Sage Hollow group photo lay on her desk, beside geological maps and land records. She turned on the yellow lamp, studying dozens of marked points: Barlow's old church, the Price textile mill, Sage Hollow's land. A thin line connected Moab to Price Canyon, south, as Whitmore noted. "If you were alive," she whispered, "you'd see it all points here." The next day, she presented preliminary findings to her cold case supervisor. The report began, soil sample, in case #77238 matches, Price Canyon, Carbon County geology. A religious facility, Sage Hollow Institute, operated there under Reverend Elias Barlow, ceased in 1980. No tax or permit records. A 1977 photo shows a girl highly resembling missing victim Amy Carpenter. The supervisor read, then asked, "What's your proposal?" Camille replied, Make this the primary investigative lead. She was cleared to contact the FBI's Utah field office for data verification. Agent Langston listened to her summary, paused, then said, "I've heard of Barlow, suspected in an illegal confinement case in 1980, but no evidence stuck. If you dig into this, some people won't like it." Camille replied, "I'm not digging up. I'm picking up where someone stopped." That evening, leaving the office, she retrieved Whitmore's file from storage. Under dim light, she reread his penciled note. "If anyone finds this, look under the ground, not on the sand." It felt like a command from the grave. She tucked the Sage Hollow photo into the file, marked it with a clip, and added, "Amy may have been here. Sage Hollow Institute, Price Canyon, 1977. Outside, the night wind carried the damp scent of fresh rain through the hall. Camille gazed through the glass, south to Price Canyon's dark sprawl. In that moment, the line between past and present blurred, as if it was all still happening, in an old wooden house, forgotten in the desert's heart. And there, in a faded group photo, a blonde girl's eyes stared into the lens, saying her story was never truly closed. In the weeks that followed, Camille Duarte focused on finding witnesses from Sage Hollow Institute's active years. Her list had only scattered names, most with no current addresses or changed identities. Cross-referencing 1970s welfare and religious registries, one name appeared twice: Linda Stowe, listed as a student in a religious reform program in Carbon County, 1977. Her record trailed to an Ogden care center, then stopped. Camille tracked old addresses, and after several calls, learned Linda lived reclusively in a mobile home park near St. George, Utah, on the desert's edge. Camille drove nearly 4 hours to meet her. The afternoon was stifling, red dust blowing in from the wind. Linda opened the door, thin, silver hair loose, eyes wary. When Camille showed her badge and explained, Linda went silent, then said softly, "Sage Hollow. I thought people forgot that place." She invited Camille in, the small room thick with cigarette smoke and old paper. A radio played vintage songs, static crackling like memories. After hearing Camille outline Amy Carpenter's disappearance, Linda nodded slowly. "I was 16 that year. My mom sent me to Sage Hollow for skipping school and lying. They said they'd make me godly." Her voice caught. "But it wasn't a church, it was a prison." Camille took notes. Linda described Sage Hollow deep in Price Canyon's woods, a 2-story wooden building, a small chapel and barrack-like dorms. The girls were forbidden private talk or leaving the fenced area, every move on command. Barlow always said, "God saw everything," Linda said. He had guardians, middle-aged men in brown robes. They read scripture, watched the doors, guarded us at night. She paused, eyes distant. That spring, a new girl arrived. Blonde, fair-skinned, soft voice, like from up north. She wasn't like the others. They said she was there for stealing a car, but I didn't buy it. She kept asking about the road back to Moab. Camille looked up. "What was her name?" "I don't know." Barlow banned real names. He gave us cleansed ones. She was called Anna. Linda recounted that Anna was only there for less than 2 weeks. She was often called to the second floor, where only Barlow and a few aides were allowed. "One night, I heard noises outside, running footsteps, someone shouting, 'Please, no.' I looked out the window and saw the blonde girl running across the yard, barefoot, her shirt torn, 2 men chasing her. Then a gunshot, or some loud sound. After that, silence." Linda paused, her hands trembling. The next morning, her room was empty. The bed was made, fresh sheets, like she'd never existed. Camille stayed silent for a moment, then asked, "Did anyone report it to the police?" Linda gave a sad, crooked smile. "Report it? There, if you spoke out, they called you a sinner." In 1977, no one believed teenage girls told the truth. A week later, they said Anna was picked up by family. But no one saw anyone come. A few months later, Sage Hollow shut down. We were sent to different places. No one mentioned it again. Camille opened her bag, pulled out the 1977 group photo, and placed it before Linda. Linda leaned close, scanning each face. When her eyes stopped on the second row, her hand tightened. "That's her," she pointed, voice shaking. "The girl I'm talking about, blonde, half smile. I remember, because she never looked straight at the camera. We were forced to pose." Camille stared at the photo, her throat tight. It was the face she'd studied for days. Those eyes, that angle. She pressed on. "What else do you remember about Barlow?" Linda nodded, her gaze cloudy. "He talked a lot about soul cleansing. But if anyone defied him, they were locked in the basement. Once, I heard crying, like a child's, coming from there. I still remember the smell of metal, damp mold, and the sound of the iron door shutting. I'll never forget it." She paused, then said slowly. "The blonde girl was taken down there for 3 days after arguing with Barlow during Bible study. When she came back up, she didn't speak anymore. Her eyes were empty, like she was already somewhere else." Camille wrote it all down, her heart pounding. Each of Linda's words matched the timeline of Amy's disappearance, even the alias Anna, a name later found on a cassette tape. Camille would discover, but at that moment, she knew she'd touched the last remaining fragment of the victim's memory. Before leaving, Camille asked, "Why agree to talk now, after all these years?" Linda looked out the window, the afternoon light falling on her weathered face. "Because I've been silent too long," she said softly. "Because no one believed a kid back then. But when you said Moab, I knew I had to speak. That girl, she didn't deserve to be forgotten like that." Camille gripped her notebook tightly, saying, "You've helped more than you know." Driving away from St. George, the sunset stained the mountains red. In the rearview mirror, the light fell on the desert. The same red hue as Price Canyon soil, the dirt Whitmore found under Amy's car. That night, Camille sat in her office, reopening the group photo and writing in her report, "Testimony of Linda Stowe confirms existence of Anna, blonde girl at Sage Hollow Institute, vanished without trace in 1977. No discharge records, no police report. High likelihood Anna is Amy Carpenter." Closing the notebook, she felt the case was no longer a cold set of data. It had breath. A voice. A witness who saw the victim's final moments. And somewhere in Utah's red desert dust, the truth waited to be named. After meeting Linda Stowe, Camille Duarte returned to her Salt Lake City office, feeling she stood at the edge of past and present. The old woman's story had reshaped every detail in Amy Carpenter's file. Whitmore's notes, "Something in the South," were no longer vague hunches. They had a face, a name, Elias Barlow. That night, Camille reopened the file cabinet. Among the old evidence from Grand County, she found a nylon bag labeled faintly, "Hair samples, passenger seat." Inside were 2 thin, light-colored hairs, poorly sealed with brown tape. Back then, DNA testing didn't exist. Whitmore only noted they might belong to the victim. But under a microscope, Camille saw one hair had a darker, thicker root, nearly black. Unlike Amy's description. Holding it under the lamp, the hair glinted dark brown. "Maybe not hers," she said softly, almost to herself. She sent an official request to the state forensics lab for STR testing, a new method that could extract DNA from tiny degraded samples. The lab techs exchanged glances, one saying, "This sample's over 30 years old. If there's DNA, it's a long shot." Camille just nodded. "I believe it's there." 2 weeks later, the first results arrived in a sealed envelope. The 10-page report concluded tersely, "Male DNA, complete 15 loci profile, does not match victim." Camille reread the line. A male's DNA, found in Amy Carpenter's car, where no struggle occurred. A man had been there or touched her belongings before the car was abandoned. The next step was comparison. She knew the National CODIS database held millions of criminal DNA profiles, but this case predated it. Random matches were unlikely. She needed a specific sample, a specific suspect. The first name in her mind was Elias Barlow. Camille dug into Barlow's records. He died in 1998, but during a 1995 tax audit, police seized personal items from his old church, comb, toothbrush, and hair from a leather chair. All were stored as property evidence from a religious fund dispute. She immediately requested Price County Sheriff's Office evidence archives. A week later, an archive clerk called, surprised. "We still have a bag of hair labeled Barlow. You sure you want to test it? It's over 20 years old." "Absolutely. Send it to the Salt Lake lab today." 3 weeks of waiting dragged heavily. Each morning, Camille checked her internal mailbox, seeing empty envelopes, then closed it. While waiting, she reread Linda Stowe's testimony, marking details matching Whitmore's notes. Blonde girl, basement confinement. Vanished one night. These weren't rumors anymore. They faced a definitive scientific test. On the morning of August 14, 2005, an email arrived. Subject: STR match confirmed. Her heart raced as she opened it. The Utah State Forensics Lab report stated clearly, male DNA from hair in victim Amy L. Carpenter's car matches 100% at 15 loci, with DNA of Elias Barlow, extracted from evidence at Barlow Congregation, Carbon County. Random match probability, less than 1 in 1 billion. Camille set the paper down, her hands trembling slightly. The first physical evidence, something Whitmore never had emerged, bridging the 1977 missing victim to Sage Hollow Institute's founder. It took a moment to steady her breathing. Linda Stowe's voice echoed in her mind. Trembling, one night, she tried to run. The next morning, her room was empty. And now in Camille's hands was proof of who was there, who last contacted Amy. Not a stranger, not a random criminal, but the man who preached soul cleansing. Camille drafted an urgent report to the Cold Case Division. DNA confirms Elias Barlow's presence in victim's car. Barlow ran Sage Hollow Institute, which vanished from records in 1980. Proposal: reopen Carpenter case as criminal investigation. Suspected abduction and murder. That afternoon, her supervisor called, voice low and tense. "You sure about this, Duarte? Barlow's dead, can't be questioned." "I don't need him alive," Camille replied. "I need the truth alive." She spent the evening in her office, reviewing every document. Everything now aligned: Price Canyon soil, red fabric from Carbon County, Linda's basement story, and now Barlow's DNA. The pieces Whitmore left over half a lifetime now fit, telling a simple, brutal story. Amy Carpenter was taken to Sage Hollow and never returned. As night fell, Camille sat at her desk. On the wall was a Utah map with the red line she'd drawn: Moab, Cisco Wash, Price Canyon. She added a small red dot at the end: Sage Hollow. Beside it, she taped a copy of the DNA results, the paper trembling slightly in the AC breeze. All those cold numbers now carried the breath of a real person. She opened Whitmore's notebook, reading his final line. "Don't let this case close forever." The lamp cast light on the page, the ink nearly blurring in the yellow glow. "No, sir," she whispered. "It's just been reopened." Outside her window, Salt Lake City was quiet. Highway lights threading silver toward the south, where Price Canyon's red soil lay still in the dark. Somewhere beneath it, Amy's trace might remain. For the first time since taking the case, Camille knew she'd touched the truth. Undeniable evidence: Elias Barlow was in Amy Carpenter's car. The DNA news spread faster than Camille expected. 2 days after her report, the FBI's Salt Lake City office contacted her, proposing a coordinated search of the old Sage Hollow Institute property in Carbon County. It was the first time in nearly 30 years that name appeared in a criminal investigation file. On September 3, 2005, a convoy of 3 FBI SUVs and 2 state police cars entered Price Canyon's valley. The sky was heavy gray, light drizzle falling, the air damp with the iron scent of soil, the same mineral found in the mud under Amy's car. Camille sat in the back of the lead vehicle, peering through the misty window. The deeper they went, the narrower the road, just an old gravel path, deserted. When they stopped, a moss-covered 2-story wooden building stood before them, its tin roof collapsed at one end. Faint traces of a sign remained on a rotting beam. Sage Hollow Institute, The air was thick with damp and metal. Dry pines obscured part of the backyard. The forensic team set up a field tent, cordoning off a 100-meter radius. Camille and FBI agent Hayes entered the main hall. Flashlights swept through thick dust. Handwritten Bible verses, nearly faded, lined the walls. A small lecture room held rows of wooden chairs. Everything seemed abandoned in a hurried night. At a dust-covered desk, Camille found a loose-locked drawer. Inside was an old tin box with yellowed papers and 4 thick notebooks. The covers read, in scrawled print, "Student Records." Camille removed her gloves, flipping through. The typed student list was crude. Names, estimated birth years, and a status C code. Among 12 remaining files, she stopped at one, Anna L. Chambers. The file included a black and white ID photo, a light-haired girl, face turned, eyes fearful, looking right. Her shirt bore embroidered initials, S.I. Camille didn't need to enlarge it. She knew it was Amy Carpenter. The file noted, age 17, origin Utah. Guardian, Clara Barlow. Below was a scrawled signature, E. Barlow. Camille's hands shook. The thin paper felt ready to crumble, but the ink stood clear. Proof Amy was here, under the false name Anna Chambers, guarded by Reverend Barlow himself. She called Hayes over. He read, then looked up. "You sure?" "Surer than anything ever," Camille replied, voice hoarse. They sealed the file for the tech team to digitize. Near the filing cabinet, they found a small, rusted safe. After 2 hours cutting it open, they uncovered bank records, tape reels, and an envelope with 10 Polaroid photos. Camille's flashlight flared as she pulled them out. Most showed the old church, Barlow amid white-robed students, smiling kindly. But the final photo stopped her, a blonde girl on a wooden chair, eyes swollen, hands tied behind her. The background was the room's wooden wall. The corner dated it, March 1977. The room's air thickened. An agent muttered, "God." Hayes signaled to photograph the scene and seize the photos and tapes. Camille turned away, eyes stinging. Months of suspicion now crystallized into undeniable images. The basement was opened that afternoon. A narrow hall reeked of damp and rusted iron. Flashlights revealed 3 small iron door cells, student confinement rooms, as Linda described. Walls bore scratched words, etched with a nail. "God forgive me." One cell had dark red paint mixed with plaster. Forensics took samples, noting traces of old hemoglobin. In a corner, they found a rotted rope, double-looped, and a rusted metal hook. Items were carefully collected. "It all points to 1977, Hayes said. Camille nodded, eyes fixed on the floor, where red dust mixed with dark fabric fibers, identical to Whitmore's find in the car. Leaving the basement, Camille paused at the stairs. Light from the door cast dust motes like threads suspended between times. She whispered, as if to herself, Whitmore was right. She was here. On the drive back, the convoy stopped at a clearing by the hillside for a quick debrief. Hayes reported, "We have Barlow's DNA match, student records, photos, physical evidence. Even without a body, this is enough to reopen as a murder case." Camille was silent, then said, "And enough to give that girl her name back." That night, in her office, she drafted a detailed 12-page report. The conclusion read, "Search of Sage Hollow Institute uncovered 12 student files, including one for Anna L. Chambers, with photo and details matching missing victim, Amy Carpenter. Falsified guardianship record, confirmed signature of Reverend Elias Barlow. Additional evidence includes rope, Polaroid photos of victim in captivity, dated March 1977. Biological traces in basement indicate human blood. Conclusion, sufficient grounds to confirm Amy Carpenter was detained at Sage Hollow under a false identity controlled by Elias Barlow." Camille reread it, then signed. In that moment, she felt a faint sound from afar, the wind of Price Canyon whistling through cliffs, or perhaps Whitmore's sigh, waiting 30 years for this line. Leaving the office, she looked south. Carbon County's mountains darkened in the sunset. Below, Sage Hollow's old wooden building lay silent. Its broken windows, reflecting faint moonlight. To Camille, it was no longer just a name in a file. It was a crime scene where a 17-year-old vanished and where justice began to speak after nearly half a century of silence. When the Sage Hollow search ended, Camille Duarte knew one question still hung in the air. How did Amy Carpenter end up in Elias Barlow's hands? She had DNA, photos, a false record, but not the path, the gap between Amy leaving her Moab home on March 14, 1977, and appearing as Anna L. Chambers in Price Canyon. To find answers, Camille chose the driest but surest route: money. In the 1970s, everything left a trace through banks, especially religious organizations with private funds. Camille requested statements for the Barlow Foundation, registered under Elias Barlow since 1974, from Utah's tax office and the Federal Reserve's Salt Lake branch. 2 weeks later, records arrived, faded paper, typed on old machines, but legible. Among small, regular monthly deposits from local donors, one large withdrawal stood out. March 14, 1977. $480 cash withdrawn at First National Bank, Moab. Camille's heart raced at the line. That was the morning Amy vanished. The note read "Withdrawn at counter, signed E. Barlow." The signature matched the one on Anna Chambers' guardianship file. No doubt, Barlow was in Moab that day. But to prove he traveled from Moab to Price Canyon at the same time, she needed more physical evidence. She called FBI agent Hayes, who joined her at Sage Hollow. "I need fuel transaction data around Cisco Wash, the area between Moab and Price," she said. Hayes laughed dryly. "You're looking for 1977 receipts," Camille replied. "If anyone kept them, it's that old gas station still there." 3 days later, they visited Cisco Wash Gas and Service, now renamed but run by the original owner's son. Marvin Cole, white-haired and sun-weathered, rummaged in a shed and brought out a rusted tin box with old ledgers. "My dad hand-wrote every sale in here, real meticulous," he said. Camille carefully turned the yellowed, sand-stuck pages. The entry for March 14, 1977, stopped her. Ford pickup, light blue, template, 3T, 92, 18 gallons regular, paid cash. Buyer signed Barlow. She looked at Hayes. He said quietly, "Moab to Price." Now we know he moved. On a map, the route from Moab to Price Canyon took about 2.5 hours, matching the gap between Amy leaving home and the Red Rock Diner reporting her absence. Camille marked the path. Moab Cisco Wash Highway 6 Price Canyon. Each leg now had evidence tied to Elias Barlow, a silent journey leading straight to her captivity. She didn't stop there. Camille dug into Barlow's personal finances. Among Sage Hollow's safe documents, she found 3 1977 Carbon County bank receipts for cash transfers for restoration program operations. All were signed by E. Barlow. One, dated March 15, 1977, just a day after Amy's disappearance, showed a $480 deposit, matching the Moab withdrawal. "It's the same transaction cycle," Camille said in an FBI meeting. Withdrawn in Moab the morning Amy vanished, deposited in Carbon County the next day. The 26-hour gap matches the travel and stop at Sage Hollow. The FBI verified with Carbon County's old bank. Though originals were gone, microfilm showed deposit by Barlow Foundation. The matching amount confirmed Elias Barlow left Moab on March 14 with cash and was in Price Canyon by the next morning. The pieces aligned: time, place, witness. A chill ran down Camille's spine as she studied the investigation board. Everything fit, almost too precisely. "He didn't just take money," she said softly. "He took Amy." In an interview with a woman who worked part-time at Carbon County Bank in 1977, Camille asked, "What do you remember about Barlow?" The elderly woman, now over 70, nodded slowly. "I remember him because he always carried loose change, all old $10 bills. The last time I saw him was mid-March. His hand was bandaged, like he'd been scratched. He said he fell off a bike in Moab." Her answer silenced the room. In Barlow's old medical records, obtained from Carbon County Hospital, there was indeed an entry. Abrasion wound on right hand, recorded March 16, 1977. Camille printed all the data, pinning it together. She knew this financial and movement trail was the red thread running through the case, proving not only that Barlow met Amy, but also that he took her from Moab in that very light blue pickup truck. That evening, as she organized the file in her office, a Utah map spread wide before her. A red line connected Moab to Price Canyon, marked with 3 points. First National Bank, Cisco Wash, Carbon County Bank. Beside each, she attached copies of receipts, invoices, and corresponding times. Together, they formed a seamless timeline of the crime. 6:30 a.m. Moab, Amy left home. Barlow withdrew money at the bank. 7:15 a.m. Cisco Wash, fuel receipt, matching plate. 9:40 a.m. Price Canyon, Barlow Foundation transaction. These 3 points traced Amy Carpenter's final journey. When the report was complete, Camille attached her conclusion: financial data and movement evidence confirm Elias Barlow's presence at every point on the Moab, Price Canyon route during the victim's disappearance. This is a logical timeline proving his direct involvement in transporting the victim from Moab to Sage Hollow. She closed the file, turned off the lamp, leaving only the map's glow. That red line, stretching across the desert, faintly lit in the night, like a thin blood trail, finally connecting where the girl left and where she was confined. Whitmore once wrote, "If anyone finds this, look under the ground." Now, Camille knew exactly which ground he meant: the red dust road from Moab to Price, where the horizon closed and Utah's secrets began to surface. With the bank records, fuel receipts, and witness testimony, Camille Duarte knew she had enough to reconstruct Amy Carpenter's final route, a 3-hour journey between 2 towns that for nearly half a century existed only in speculation. She opened a Utah topographic map across her desk, Highway 191, running straight from Moab through Cisco Wash, merging into Highway 6 toward Price Canyon. A seemingly ordinary road, but on the morning of March 14, 1977, it was the line between freedom and disappearance. Camille contacted the FBI's Spatial Crime Scene Analysis Unit, requesting a GIS route reconstruction. Raw data, coordinates of gas stations, banks, and case file points were entered. When the screen lit up, a red curve cut through the desert. Moab, Cisco Wash, Thompson Springs, Price Canyon. Each marker matched the timeline with chilling precision. She started at the first point. Moab, 6:45 a.m. Bank records confirmed Elias Barlow withdrew money at First National Bank's counter at 6:37 a.m. Per Amy's mother, she left home around 6:40. Whitmore's file noted, a neighbor saw her talking to a light blue pickup truck. Both moments nearly overlapped, less than 10 minutes apart. Camille wrote in her report, 6:45. High likelihood Amy met Barlow on the dirt road near the Carpenter house. From there, the only route to the highway was Highway 191, tracing the Colorado Valley, then crossing arid redland to Cisco Wash. The gas station receipt logged 7:22 a.m., mid-route. Barlow stopped to pump 18 gallons of regular, paid cash. Camille projected a satellite map on the wall, pointing, if he left Moab at 6:45, driving 50 miles per hour, he'd reach here by 7:20. Perfect match. From Cisco Wash, the route continued west, joining Highway 6, a winding, rugged road climbing to Coal Hills. By 8:40 a.m., the truck would reach Price Canyon's edge. Per Carbon County Bank's deposit record, Elias Barlow appeared at the counter at 9:10 a.m. Camille circled this, noting journey's end. The times formed a seamless chain. 6:45, left Moab. 7:22, Cisco Wash. 9:10, Price Canyon. She cross-checked the geological data from the mud under Amy's car. The geochemistry lab report confirmed the mud's hematite and bentonite minerals matched Price Canyon Formation's 20-30 meter deep strata, absent around Moab. Thus, Amy's Ford Maverick was in or near Price Canyon. Camille compiled this into a route diagram. On the digital map, she marked 3 red dots linked by a thin line. Each dot noted the time and confirming evidence. When projected on a large screen during an FBI and state police meeting, the room fell silent. Agent Hayes stared at the image. No doubt now. Barlow followed the exact route to take the girl from Moab to his camp. 3.5 hours, enough to vanish from the town's sight. Camille opened a modern satellite image slide. The area matching the red soil around Price Canyon and the car's mud sample was highlighted. She explained, "The soil in Amy's car contains mineral ratios unique to the south side of Sage Hollow's camp. Nowhere else in Utah has this soil type." She paused. This means the car was at the camp. That afternoon, they drove to the site for verification. Camille sat in the passenger seat, GPS map open. The road appeared nearly unchanged after almost 40 years, red sand slopes, scattered sagebrush, and low cacti. Passing Cisco Wash, she looked out at the old gas station, still standing in the dry lot, its sign faded. Everything was eerily quiet, as if time froze on March 14, 1977. 2 miles from Price Canyon, the soil shifted from yellow to deep red. Camille stepped out, scooped a handful of sand, pressing it, fine, slightly sticky, exactly the red clay the geochemistry lab described. She compared it to the file's mud sample, a perfect match. In that moment, every calculation and map became real beneath her feet. This was Amy's path. That night, in the investigation room, Camille hand-drew the route. She noted each marker: Moab, start; Cisco Wash, first physical contact; Price Canyon, end. Beside it, she taped Amy's 1976 photo, eyes straight at the lens. 3.5 hours drive, and a lifetime gone, she whispered. When the report was finalized, Camille submitted it to the FBI, titled, Subject, Reconstruction of Route, Amy L. Carpenter Disappearance. Summary: evidence indicates subject was transported from Moab to Price Canyon between 6:45 a.m. and 9:10 a.m. on the 14th of March, 1977. Route verified via financial transactions, fuel records, witness testimony, and geological soil match. Vehicle soil samples align with Price Canyon formation, therefore vehicle and victim present at Sage Hollow vicinity during time frame. The document was signed by 3 parties: FBI, Utah State Police, and Camille Duarte. This route diagram became the cornerstone evidence in the reopened Carpenter case. The first-time data proved Amy was deliberately moved. As the meeting room emptied, Camille stayed alone before the lit screen. The red line from Moab to Price Canyon glowed, simple yet heavy. She touched the screen, tracing the route, imagining the 1977 dawn sweeping the desert, glinting off the silver Ford and the dark-haired man at the wheel. 3 hours, just 3. Enough to take a life from the world. Night wind slipped through the window, carrying a chill from the south. Camille closed the file, labeling it Reconstructed Route Evidence, March 14, 1977. A mix of sorrow and resolve stirred within her. Everything aligned: time, space, the road. Amy Carpenter's path was no longer a mystery. It was restored by data, soil, and the memory of those who never stopped searching. On a foggy October morning, Camille Duarte returned to Carbon County for a follow-up search of the old Barlow Congregation Church, now a skeletal wooden frame on Price Canyon's edge. After reconstructing the route from Moab, she believed something untouched remained in those rotting walls. A voice, a trace of time. And she was right. The storage room behind the chapel, once noted in blueprints as hymn archive, was sealed by dust and cobwebs. When forensics broke the rusted lock, a musty smell of damp wood poured out. Inside, amid rotting paper crates, they found an old wooden box engraved Sermons, 1976, 1978. It held 9 Maxell cassette tapes, dark plastic coated in red dust. Each had a handwritten label: Session 1, Confession 2, Anna, Prayer, Deliverance. Camille carefully packed them in anti-static bags, sending them to the FBI's Audio Recovery Lab in Salt Lake City. Recovery took over 2 weeks. The tapes were moldy, some broken. Technicians dried them, cleaned mold with special solution, and copied each waveform. When the first tape played in the lab's headphones, Camille stood frozen. A deep, clear, slightly hoarse male voice, calm, practiced, a preacher's cadence. God brought you here, Anna. Out there sin would swallow you. Here, you'll be cleansed. A pause, then soft breathing, a stifled sob from a girl. The voice continued, "Do you know why I chose you? Because God pointed. The world doesn't need to understand, only God does." Camille bit her lip, goosebumps rising. She nodded to the technician to log the timestamp. 0 hours 3 minutes and 22 seconds, dialogue between Elias Barlow and female victim, called Anna. Other tapes were fragmented, sermons, group prayers, distant organ notes. But in two labeled Anna, Prayer, and Confession 2, the male voice returned, gentler but heavy with intent. "You don't need to remember Moab, you're no longer a lost child. Here, I give you a new name, Anna Chambers. You belong to God." A weak female voice replied, almost a whisper, "Please, let me go home." A thud followed, then silence. The room listened in stunned quiet. The technician paused the tape, turning to Camille, eyes mixed with shock and pity. "If this is really from 1977, he said, "we're hearing Amy Carpenter's voice, weeks before she vanished." To confirm, Camille sent the audio to Utah's Forensic Voice Analysis Center, which used formant frequency and pitch software to compare voices. They extracted Barlow's voice from a 1975 sermon tape in old court archives, overlaying its spectrum with Anna, Prayer. The screen showed two patterns nearly identical across 17 audio traits. The report concluded, male voice in Anna, Prayer matches Reverend Elias Barlow's at 98.6% by formant analysis. No reasonable doubt of alternate identity. Camille read the results, gripping the paper until its edges creased. Everything she, Whitmore, and Linda Stowe imagined was now real, captured in sound. No longer hearsay or hunch, living proof. Barlow spoke to Amy, called her Anna, said, "God brought you here." She listened again, lights off, eyes closed. The voice echoed from the ground, "You'll be cleansed." Behind it, faint wind howled, metal clinked, then long silence. Camille opened her eyes, tears welling from anger or pity. In that moment, she felt both presences, the 17-year-old pleading for home, and the man who, in faith's name, confined her. The FBI dated the recordings by analyzing iron oxide on the tapes, produced and used around April to May 1977, just after Amy's disappearance. Dust on the cassette box matched the basement's soil minerals at Sage Hollow. Everything aligned chillingly. At the debrief, Hayes stated, "We have the DNA match, fake records, travel route, and now his voice in the same time frame. This is the complete puzzle." Camille nodded, eyes on the sealed tape in its plastic bag. It was the only remnant of the victim's true voice, her breath, her pleas, her final silence. That night, alone after others left, Camille replayed Confession 2, fast-forwarding to the end. Barlow's voice grew lower, as if preaching to himself. "Humans are weak. God knows this. When we guide them, sometimes God demands sacrifice. And if anyone leaves, God decides the rest." A long pause. Then a metal door slammed shut, and the tape ended. Camille removed the headphones, leaning back. The desk lamp lit dust motes, glowing like red soil falling slowly. She realized, after all these years, Amy's legacy wasn't images or traces, it was her voice, an indelible proof piercing 4 decades to tell the truth. The November 19th, 2005, report concluded, recovered audio from Barlow's religious facility cassettes contains Reverend Elias Barlow's voice interacting with the victim, identified as Amy Carpenter. Based on timing and context, this is indirect but highly probative evidence confirming the victim's presence at Sage Hollow Institute post-disappearance. Details indicate coercion, confinement, and psychological control. Camille reviewed the report, signed it, and closed the file. She placed the cassette in storage, locking the door, the click echoing in the empty room. Outside, wind swept Carbon County's dark mountains. In that silence, she imagined the old sound resonating in the valley, the hoarse male voice saying, "God brought you here," and the trembling whisper replying, "Please let me go home." When the cassette report was finalized and sealed, Amy Carpenter's case was officially escalated to federal level. For 19 years, Camille Duarte quietly pursued it, piecing together Whitmore's notes, DNA, fake records, travel routes, and a voice in the dark. Now, it formed a closed chain of evidence strong enough for an arrest warrant. On June 9, 2024, Camille and FBI agent Hayes submitted a nearly 400-page file to the Utah federal court. In the motion, she wrote, "Based on matching DNA evidence, financial data, travel routes, and confirmed audio, there is sufficient basis to hold Elias Barlow responsible for kidnapping, unlawful detention, and document forgery related to victim Amy Lynn Carpenter." The federal judge approved it the next morning. Warrant #24162B was issued on June 11, 2024. One line made Camille reread twice. Subject Elias Barlow, age 82. Last known residence, Moab, Utah. After over 40 years, that name was read aloud in a wanted order, no longer a pastor but a criminal suspect. On June 12 morning, Moab's sky was clear, sunlight glinting off the Colorado Valley's red cliffs. A task force of 4 black SUVs entered the south suburb, where a small wooden house stood isolated between cottonwoods. Locals knew the silver-haired old man, living quietly, occasionally attending church. No one knew he was once investigated for a mysterious disappearance nearly half a century ago. At 6:40 a.m., the team approached. Camille stood outside, clutching the file as Hayes led the raid. The door opened after 3 knocks. Elias Barlow appeared, thin, in a white shirt, eyes strikingly clear for an 82-year-old. He showed no fear, only stared at Camille, lips pursed. As an agent read the warrant, Barlow nodded slightly, voice low and steady. "I kept them to save them." No resistance, no questions about charges. He offered his wrists for cuffs. Camille looked at those hands, knobby, wrinkled, yet the same hands that signed Anna L. Chambers' false record. She thought of Amy, Linda Stowe, and the girls never saved. Inside, police seized a thick brown leather journal, a box of Polaroids, and an old expense ledger. The journal, half-written, mixed Bible verses with personal thoughts. God called them here to be cleansed. On another page, March 14, 1977. The girl arrived, blonde, panicked eyes. God tested my faith. Camille flipped further. Later lines were smeared, but Anna was legible. The Polaroid box held 6 old photos. One showed Sage Hollow's lecture room, another a group of white-robed students, and 2 clearer ones. A blonde girl, head bowed, hands tied in front. The timestamp read March 1977, same as the 2005 find. 2 new photos, one of the basement hall, another of a half-open iron door. Camille's heart tightened. She signaled to seal them all. The expense ledger caught her most. Handwritten entries, fuel, Cisco wash. Donation, Carbon County. Supplies, price. And finally, March 15, 1977. Linen replacement, Sage Hollow. The last line was boldly underlined, like a special note. An agent read aloud, "Looks like he replaced bedding the day after Amy vanished." Camille replied, voice hoarse, "Not looks like, exactly so." At Grand County Station, Barlow was taken to interrogation. White light reflected off his thick glasses. Camille sat across, photos, files, and tapes before her. She opened the file, reading aloud, "Mr. Elias Barlow, you're under arrest for kidnapping, unlawful detention, guardianship, forgery, and obstructing a criminal investigation in Amy Lynn Carpenter's disappearance. Do you have anything to say?" Barlow stayed silent long, eyes fixed on her. Then he spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "I kept them to save them. No one understands God's mission." Camille inhaled deeply, her voice turning cold. "And the blonde girl? How did God save her?" Barlow didn't answer. He closed his eyes, leaned back, lips murmuring a prayer. Police recorded it all. The transcript held only, "I kept them to save them." After processing, Elias Barlow was transferred to a temporary jail in Salt Lake City, pending prosecution, under special medical watch due to age and health. But in Camille's file, it was clear the man who called himself a soul guide had stolen at least one girl's life. That night, Camille returned to her office, opening the sealed journal. Amid Bible quotes, a shaky line read, "They don't know that when the light is too strong, the dark no longer fears." Below, a scrawled signature, E. Barlow. She signed the day's final report, titled, Federal Arrest Report. Case #77238. Subject Elias Barlow. Charges, kidnapping, unlawful detention, forgery of guardian documents. Arrested June 12, 2024. Moab, Utah. The report was sent at 22:14. In the office's yellow lamplight, Camille sat alone, looking at the old Polaroid on her desk. Amy's face, blurred in the flash, half in pain, half waiting to be found. She whispered, "We found him, Amy." Finally. Outside, the wind swept through the desert, carrying red dust that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. After 47 years, the circle had closed. The man who once stood at a pulpit preaching salvation was now handcuffed for kidnapping and forgery. And in that silence, Camille felt more clearly than ever. Justice sometimes arrives not with gunfire or blazing light, but through yellowed files and a chilling phrase that shook the world. "I kept them to save them." After Elias Barlow's arrest, the Amy Carpenter case entered a phase of comprehensive forensic analysis, a dry but weighty task, more compelling than any confession. Camille Duarte knew that to close the case, every piece of evidence had to speak the same truth through science. Every hair, every fingerprint, every dust particle had to confirm that Amy Carpenter and Elias Barlow were in the same place at the same moment. The Utah State Forensics Lab, working with the FBI, took charge. Evidence sealed years ago, hair from the car, the red fabric, soil samples, Polaroid photos, and items from Barlow's home, was opened under protective glass. Camille was present on the first day of analysis, the lab's white light casting shadows on her tired eyes. On the table, technicians in gloves opened the old nylon bag, labeled, "Hair Passenger Seat." That dark hair, the tiny evidence Whitmore overlooked, was now placed beside hair samples from Barlow's arrest. The store and Y chromosome sequencing ran simultaneously. When results flashed on the screen, a long string of numbers appeared, 15 perfect matches, one within acceptable variance. The summary read, DNA from the victim's car seat, Sage Hollow archive hair, and suspect Elias Barlow's sample match at 99.94% probability. No chance of random coincidence. Camille exhaled slowly. This was the result she'd awaited for 19 years. Irrefutable proof that this man sat in Amy Carpenter's car, his trace lingering in the air, fabric, and dust. Next was the dark red fabric, the sole evidence Dale Whitmore, preserved in an old envelope. After nearly 30 years, its color held, edges only slightly frayed. Mass spectrometry revealed traces of synthetic chlorine bleach, sodium hypochlorite, and organic phosphate, chemicals used only in industrial laundry systems at 1970s religious and reform facilities. Cross-referencing Sage Hollow's chemical records, the FBI found a 1976 CleanRite supply invoice for detergent mix for linens, Sage Hollow Religious Institute. The chemical profiles matched perfectly. Residual detergent on the fabric aligns with products used at Sage Hollow Institute. Random match probability below 0.01%. Camille held the report, hands trembling slightly. That red fabric, once in Amy's car, had endured 4 decades to confirm Sage Hollow as her prison. Whitmore was right, and now he wasn't here to hear it. The forensic team expanded testing to the iron door lock from Sage Hollow's basement. Thick rust made fingerprint recovery nearly impossible, but new technology using ninhydrin solution and laser scanning revealed latent sweat marks in the metal grooves. When the fingerprint image appeared, technicians froze, 3 clear prints emerged. 2 were faint, but one, a right thumb, was sharp. Comparison with Barlow's arrest fingerprints showed a complete match. Fingerprint #03 matches, suspect Barlow's right thumb, at 14 characteristic points. Confirms direct contact with the basement lock, where blood and rope were found. Camille stood silent, staring at the magnified image on the screen. Swirling ridges, bold and chillingly clear. The hand that preached, that raised a Bible in church, also locked the door, caging Amy Carpenter. Finally, chemical analysis of dust from Amy's car seat and Sage Hollow's basement showed both contained silica oxide mixed with hematite, unique to Price Canyon's red clay. No greater coincidence was possible. Amy's car was at the camp. The 73-page federal forensic summary arrived in late June. Its final page held a conclusion Camille memorized. Combined biological, chemical, and physical analysis concludes that victim Amy Lynn Carpenter and suspect Elias Barlow had direct contact in the same physical space, specifically at Sage Hollow Institute, Carbon County, Utah, circa March-April 1977. Camille closed the file, looking out the window. Salt Lake's sky darkened, light rain streaking the glass. She thought of Dale Whitmore, the sheriff, who sealed that fabric with the note, "Something in the South." He saw beyond his era, lacking only the tools to prove it. Now science had done the rest. At the next interagency meeting, Agent Hayes summarized, "We have a complete evidence chain, financial, movement, DNA, physical, audio. Each piece stands alone, but together, they tell one story." He looked at Camille, nodding slightly. "We've closed the circle, no doubt remains." Camille didn't speak. She stared at the projected images, the dark hair, red fabric, fingerprint on the lock. All so small they seemed trivial, yet they preserved the story of a girl lost in 1977. As the meeting ended, Camille gathered her files, pausing at the bolded conclusion. She took a pen, writing in the margin, not as an addition, but a personal note. "Finally, the truth has shape, color, sound, and blood, and no one can erase it now." Outside, the rain turned to strong wind, carrying Utah's desert dust into the humid air. Camille stepped into the hall, her footsteps echoing in the silence, each one resounding like Whitmore's words, "Don't let this case close forever." Now it was open, through science, persistence, and undeniable evidence that Amy Carpenter and Elias Barlow were in the same place, where the darkness was finally named. The federal jail's interrogation room in Salt Lake City was cold and stark. Fluorescent light glared down on the steel table, reflecting off the two-way glass where Camille Duarte sat observing. Elias Barlow, 82, sat upright across from Agent Hayes, shirt collar unbuttoned, hands clasped. His eyes were clear, eerily calm, not those of a criminal facing dozens of proofs, but of someone awaiting a sermon. This was the first of 3 consecutive interrogation days. Camille chose silence, watching. Hayes began calmly, "Mr. Barlow, we have your DNA in Amy Carpenter's car. A student file for Anna Chambers, signed by you as guardian. A tape with your voice calling her Anna. Care to explain?" Barlow smiled, unshaken. "I taught many girls. I don't recall them all. If my name's in old files, it was for God's work." Hayes leaned forward. "God's work doesn't include tying up a 17-year-old and hiding her body." Barlow raised his head slowly, voice lower. "That girl begged for salvation. You see things through worldly eyes, so you don't understand." Camille clenched her fists. Barlow was framing his crimes as a religious rite, as fanatics do when cornered. She signaled Hayes to continue. Over the next 3 days, interrogations stretched for hours. Barlow answered sporadically, repeating scriptures, sometimes falling silent, eyes distant, as if hearing another voice. They presented each piece, Polaroid photos, red fabric, expense ledger, DNA results, and finally, the Moab bank receipt. For the first time, Barlow's calm wavered. His eyelids flickered as he saw the paper. Hayes pressed, March 14, 1977, You withdrew $480 in Moab. That morning, Amy Carpenter vanished. You were there, weren't you? I traveled many places, Barlow replied. God sent me to find lost souls. But only one never came back. Barlow said nothing. Hand on his chest, voice barely audible to the recorder. She begged to call home, Moab. Camille froze. Those words, begged to call home. Moab mirrored Linda Stowe's testimony of Amy. Pleading to return, denied by Barlow. The room stilled for seconds. Hayes lowered his voice, deliberate. What did you say? She wanted to call home. But I couldn't let her. God tested my faith. That statement, clearly recorded, was the final piece. It proved Barlow's direct contact with Amy, knowing she was from Moab. He could no longer claim Anna was a stranger. Camille stood, crossed through the glass, and entered the room. She placed the old Polaroid before him, its faded flash lighting Amy's wide-eyed face. This is the girl you said God brought to save, right? Barlow glanced briefly, then turned away. I don't need to look, he said softly. God took all mortal memories from me. No, Elias, Camille replied, using his first name. God didn't take anything. You chose to forget, to avoid seeing your sins. He gave a crooked smile. If my sins saved them, that was the sacrifice. Saved? By tying them in a basement? By making them vanish? Camille leaned in, voice low, cold. What God taught you to kill a child, begging for home? Barlow fell silent. A long pause stretched, filled only by the wall clock and the recorder's hum. Then he sighed, eyes closing. You want a confession, but I have no zid. That girl was chosen. God took her. Camille stared, speaking slowly. No, God didn't take her. You did. Barlow stayed mute, lips murmuring meaningless prayers. The third day's interrogation ended in heavy silence. As guards let him out, he turned, eyes cloudy yet burning with something unnameable. Before leaving, he requested to write a final note in the record. Below his signature, Elias Barlow, he carefully wrote in English, "Cases closed in God's hand." Camille watched the shaky script close. In her mind, the pen's scratch sounded like sand falling on his own coffin lid. Barlow hadn't confessed, but he'd unwittingly confirmed everything. He knew Amy's real name, her Moab origin, her plea to call home. This was no longer speculation. It was validation, cloaked in his warped faith. That evening, Camille returned to her office, opening Whitmore's old notebook. At its final page, his words remained. Something in the South. She took a pen, writing below, found. He's here, and he spoke. Outside, desert wind carried Price Canyon's red dust, smearing the glass. She gazed out, picturing the rotting wooden house, the basement where Amy begged for home. Now, she knew those words were true. The next day, the FBI finalized the interrogation report. The summary, sent to the federal prosecutor, ended in bold. Subject's statement includes verbal acknowledgement, matching witness testimony regarding the victim's request to contact family in Moab. While suspect denies wrongdoing, linguistic analysis suggests implicit admission of direct custody and psychological control over the victim prior to disappearance. Reading this, Camille knew the case was complete. No confession was needed. Everything spoke. DNA, fabric, fingerprints, voice, route, and now his own words. The man who saw himself as God's messenger. She left the office at dusk, the setting sun casting a red-orange glow over the southern mountains. There was no triumph, only weary peace. After 47 years, a girl's plea from Utah's desert was heard, not by God, but by people. And the man who ignored it sat behind bars, his final words, closing his own life. Case is closed in God's hand. The federal trial, Elias Barlow vet, the United States, opened on the morning of September 5, 2024, at Salt Lake City's Northern District Courthouse under late summer's harsh sun. Crowds lined the hall early. Media jostled with cameras, while familiar faces filled the gallery. Camille Duarte, the investigator who pursued the case for nearly 2 decades. Linda Stowe, Sage Hollow's last surviving witness, and a few Moab residents, who never forgot the girl lost in the desert. As Barlow was led in, the room fell silent. He wore a gray shirt, collar neatly buttoned, silver hair cropped short. His eyes were bright but empty, scanning as if this were a religious service, not his trial. Before the cameras, he maintained an old pastor's calm. No one could guess this man once ran a moral restoration center that vanished from the map with at least one life. Federal prosecutor Janice Ellery opened clearly, firmly. 47 years ago, a 17-year-old girl, Amy Lynn Carpenter, left her Moab home and never returned. Today we prove that Elias Barlow, under a pastor's guise, lured her to Sage Hollow Institute, detained her, and made her disappear forever. She pointed to the evidence array, nylon bags of old items, Polaroid photos, red fabric, DNA results, the Moab, Price Canyon route map, and restored cassettes. Each piece, she said, is a fragment of time science brought back to speak for that girl. The trial spanned 9 days, with over 20 witnesses and 12 technical experts. Day 1. DNA analysts presented STR and YSTR comparisons, confirming the car's hair, Sage Hollow's sample, and Barlow's matched at 99.94%. A large screen showed a chart, green and red bars aligning perfectly. The room sat silent, only the court clerk's pen tapping. Day 2, geologists described mineral analysis from the car's undercarriage and Sage Hollow's basement, proving both shared Price Canyon Formation soil, matching Camille's reconstructed route. They displayed a 3D map, tracing the journey. 6:45 a.m., leaving Moab, 7:22 at Cisco Wash, 9:10 in Price Canyon. Barlow sat still, eyes following the red line, as if seeing himself drive years ago. Day 3. The room chilled as the Anna prayer tape played for the jury. The deep male voice rang out. God brought you here, Anna. Out there sin would swallow you. Here, you'll be cleansed. Then a faint sob, a tiny plea. Please, let me go home. Spectators bowed their heads. Linda Stowe covered her mouth, tears streaming. The prosecutor paused the tape at the sound of a metal door closing. That, Ellery said, was the last room she was in. Day 4, Linda Stowe took the witness stand. Small, voice trembling but clear, she recounted Sage Hollow, Anna, the blonde girl. And the night she heard running feet, a cry of please, no, then silence. Barlow looked up for the first time, his gaze meeting Linda's. She paused, then said directly, he called us souls to save, but he didn't save anyone. He killed them. Day 5, Camille Duarte testified as lead investigator. She detailed the case from receiving the file in 2005 to finding DNA, mapping the route, locating witnesses, and arresting Barlow. The screen showed the old church wall, the Anna L.L. Chambers file, Barlow's matching fingerprint, and forensic conclusions. Everything he touched, Camille said, tells the same story. The defense's only strategy was denial, claiming the evidence was circumstantial, that no body, no murder. But each rebuttal met physical proof, DNA, fake records, voice, map. It stacked like an unbreakable wall. Day 6, a psychologist analyzed Barlow's behavior. This is a controlling fanatic offender, using salvation to justify violence. He believes he's God's tool, denying guilt through faith when cornered. The room sat silent. Barlow remained still, lips murmuring prayers. Day 7, the prosecution presented final evidence. The Polaroid from Barlow's home, showing Amy bound. Enlarged on the screen, Barlow looked without expression, but his aged hands trembled slightly. Day 8, both sides gave closing arguments. Prosecutor Ellery stated, Amy Carpenter vanished, but her evidence never did. We have her voice, fingerprints, DNA. No God was here, just a man who thought he could decide who lives, who dies. The defense said only, no body, no murder. But as he finished, the jurors looked away. They'd heard enough. Day 9, the verdict came. Barlow stood, hands on the table. His face no longer held its earlier confidence. The judge's voice rang steady, based on all presented evidence, DNA, physical items, audio, and witness testimony. The court finds defendant Elias Barlow guilty of kidnapping, unlawful detention, document forgery, and actions leading to the death of Amy Lynn Carpenter. The defendant is sentenced to life without parole. Barlow closed his eyes. His lips moved, not in prayer but a whisper. Case is closed in God's hand. Officers led him out. No one spoke. Camille sat still, then looked at Linda Stowe. She nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. It ended in silence. That afternoon, the media reported briefly, Elias Barlow, former pastor accused of kidnapping a Moab girl in 1977, sentenced to life. No one added that the case lived again through yellowed papers and a voice rising from the desert. Leaving the courthouse, Camille looked south. The sun cast a red-orange glow, staining the sky like Price Canyon soil. She said softly, as if to someone out there. Justice came, Amy, finally. In that moment, the wind blew, carrying red dust sparkling in the dusk, mirroring the light of that 1977 morning when a young girl left Moab and never returned. Amy Lynn Carpenter's story is not just a 47-year investigation in Utah, but a mirror of values America still grapples with: justice, faith, and community responsibility. The case's lingering pain lies not only in Elias Barlow's crimes, but in how a system overlooked a 17-year-old's cry, with the initial file coldly concluding, possible runaway, no foul play. That runaway bias wasn't just a flaw of its time, it persists in parts of America today when adults, authorities, or society quickly judge a missing teen as bringing it on themselves. Amy Carpenter reminds us that every disappearance, however small or vague, deserves to be heard and investigated as a life worth protecting. From Dale Whitmore preserving an evidence envelope to Camille Duarte pursuing the case for 2 decades, we see the power of individual responsibility, something modern America sometimes forgets amid fast lives and technology. One man kept a scrap of fabric, another believed in red soil, small acts that reshaped Utah's legal system. The lesson from this case is justice never comes alone. It demands people to nurture and claim it. In any community today, indifference is crime's silent accomplice. Trust in evidence, truth, and human voices, for sometimes, as Camille said, even a speck of dust can hold justice's testimony. Thank you for following Amy Carpenter's justice journey to its end, a case nearly buried in Utah's desert, but finally unveiled after almost half a century. If you believe every truth deserves to be found, subscribe to our channel to explore more untold cases where justice still waits to be named.